All right, the Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by your next Ford F-150 at Mack Hike Ford, I-55 North in Jackson. We welcome in National College Football Analyst with ESPN, Tom Luginbill. Lugs joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. How was South Dakota last weekend, Lugs?
Did you get a chance to see any of it?
I did. I didn't watch a lot of it, but I was out and about at lunch, and I looked up. I went, dang, Luginbill's at that game.
Dude, it was, first of all, as a player, coach, broadcaster, whether I was on the field or in the booth, I have never, ever, ever experienced wind like that during a football contest. And when I say wind, I'm not talking about gusts. I'm not talking about blustery, swirling winds. I'm talking about sustained anywhere from 25 to 40 mile an hour winds for the entirety of the whole game, to the point where not a single team scored a point in the north end zone because you could barely cross the 50-yard line. It was something that really impacted both teams, particularly Villanova. They kind of played into South Dakota State's hands given who they are and how they like to play the style of football they play. But it was something I'd never experienced before, and for those players and coaches, it was already like 28 degrees. It had to have been close to 5 degrees all day long because of the wind. It was absolutely nuts, man. It really was.
And so you're freezing your tail off during this deal, right?
Well, I'm in the booth for this one, and so I was not on the field. I was down there for pregame warm-up, taking videos of the kickers and the punters because it started to be comical. I mean, when they're kicking field goals from like the 35-yard line, and the ball would go straight up towards the goalpost and then veer off to the right suddenly, or drop straight out of the sky. I mean, it was. I've got videos. I can send them to you. You'll die laughing. Like, some of these things were like straight comedy. Like, no way. There's no way that just happened. So no, the rest of the time I was in the booth, thankfully.
Do you know what we're visiting with Tom Luginbill with ESPN. Do you know some of your schedule over the holidays as far as games?
So I've got the famous Toastery Bowl next Monday in the booth in Charlotte, and then I have a New Year's Six Bowl. I'm just not allowed to say what it is because our PR people haven't made the announcements of all the bowl assignments yet.
Okay.
But I will be doing a prominent New Year's Six game, and then of course signing day is next week, and then we've got the Under Armour game after my bowl game, and then things will settle down just a little bit.
Okay. All right. Well, let's jump into recruiting then. Juice Wells, Lane Kiffin and the crew hosted the South Carolina wide receiver. He was hurt this year, but very productive prior to that. Give me Tom Luginbill's eval on Juice Wells, wide receiver in the transfer portal.
Well, number one, I think he's a really, really good go-to player. When I say that, like, he's one of those guys that wants the ball. You can trust him. He's reliable. He's a playmaker with the ball in his hand. He's one of those guys that quarterbacks will gravitate towards because he's so productive, particularly with the ball in his hand after the catch. I think he's got some upside as well, in the return game to be able to make some plays in that area too. So really versatile. It's probably a good way that I would describe him. Plays inside and outside, so he's not built like your typical slot. He's built more like an outside guy, but he can play in both areas.
Okay. Can you compare him to someone that we would know as far as stylistically, both body type and the way that he plays?
That's a really good question. He's a little bit like Adonai Mitchell at Texas that used to be at Georgia, only Adonai is about 1.5 inches taller than Juice Wells. But that same type of physicality and heftiness and bolt to his frame, just a well-built target.
Nice. All right. Chris Paul Jr., linebacker out of Arkansas, is going to Ole Miss. That's a big pickup for Golding, considering who they're losing.
Yeah, listen, I think it is. Anytime you can find guys out there that have played that you look at and you say, okay, can this guy help us? you got to target those guys, man. I think that's kind of what stands out to me with guys like that. Pretty heavily recruited guy that didn't test well coming out of high school. When I say that, he didn't have a blazing fast 40 time. He played really well on tape. He just didn't hit some of those other measurable marks. And I think that's one of the reasons why when he was getting recruited, like the recruitment was all over the map. You'd have, Arkansas and Tennessee, but then you'd also have Georgia State and Austin Peay and Central Florida and Florida Atlantic. So, and that's probably why. And he wasn't your traditional sized player either, in relationship to, maybe how you'd say, hey, we'd ideally like to have this height or this weight for that position.
Okay. Tom Luginbill heads up recruiting for ESPN and also national college football analyst. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Let's go to Blake Shapen. Baylor transfer. He's going to join Levy in Mississippi State. I think it looks like he's going to be QB1, but there could be some other things play out in the portal the next 4 weeks. What can you tell us about Blake Shapen?
So this is a guy coming out of high school out of the state of Louisiana that was under the radar because a lot of people felt he was going to play baseball. And, he was initially at one point he was committed to LSU. He, I think, received his first scholarship offer actually from Arizona State right around the time it would have been probably between Jaden Daniels' freshman and sophomore year. But he was an under-the-radar guy, really talented, multi-sport guy. And then he ends up at Baylor and clearly had gone back, by, Jerry Bohannon, who ended up, they thought he was going to be the guy. And then Blake Shapen beats him out, and then he ends up transferring out. The issue that you have with Blake Shapen is not talent related. It's, can he stay healthy? He's just had a history of being banged up and missing games. And it took a huge toll on Baylor this year because they ended up having to play with Sawyer Robertson, who was not ready to play. Then they ended up having to go to a third guy, and they just had it was tough sledding for Baylor on offense because the quarterback position got all screwed up. And so I think he's talented. I think he's got a really quick release, good athlete, but you got to keep him healthy. And just like in the NFL draft and now what I would call college free agency, I'll give you another example here. Tyler Shuck out of Oregon and most recently Texas Tech. Like, I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole. He can't stay healthy. He's hurt every single year. And that doesn't help you. I don't know how you get better if you can't count on a guy to be there every week. So, I know, and Blake Shapen hasn't had the injury history that Tyler Shuck has, but just another example of things that you got to investigate when you're going through the process.
So if he stays healthy, you think he fits what Levy wants to do in that offense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he can make all the throws, got a quick release, ball comes out fast. All of those sorts of things are positives with him.
Okay. Do you have anything on Michael Van Buren out of Baltimore, Maryland, who committed to Levy? He's a high school guy, so it'll be a few years. But what do you and your team think about his, I guess, high school career and development? He was committed to Oregon, and then now he's committed to Mississippi State.
Well, he's had a remarkably productive high school career in an area and level of football that is really strong up there in the DMV, the District of Columbia and Maryland and Virginia area. We have him in the Under Armour game that's coming January. If I were to give you an assessment of him in a comp, he's like a right-handed Dylan Gabriel. He's not going to wow you with height. He's going to be on the shorter side, but he's a good athlete, good enough as a runner, can make all the throws, has a really live arm, maybe not in the lead arm, Dylan Gabriel doesn't either. But I thought, and I was in Bristol last night doing a show, just got back this morning, and I was on the show with my weekly partner, Dusty Dvorak, and I was telling him, because he played with Jeff Levy in Oklahoma, and I told him, I said, hey, man, Levy, he got one. You got a pretty good player. I said, we really like that kid. So we were discussing him last night. But no, I think it's a nice pickup this late in the game to get a high school guy like that that's a fit to go out in the transfer portal and get a bridge gap guy and do it all in less than, a week? Mm-hmm. Really impressive.
Yeah, he hadn't even had his staff together, but for a couple of days going into this past weekend, and they had a big weekend considering. Tom Luginbill with ESPN on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. And all right, let's go through Cam Franklin and JJ Harrell. So let's go JJ. I don't know if you have anything. I know you have something on Cam Franklin because he's a huge recruit. Do you have an eval on JJ Harrell out of Mississippi who is committed to Levy?
Let me see here what I have. I'm going actually through my database right now because I'm actually writing for .com a quarterback transfer portal piece.
Oh, nice.
In terms of right fits out there for guys and things of that nature. This is a kid out of North Panola, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I read my report on him. I wrote this on August the 17th of 2021. So he would have been really young, 2024 class kid. Looks to have a wiry frame that will continue to add size for the next level. Displays the athleticism to be a productive route runner with speed to be a vertical threat. Has good enough ball skills to make the difficult catches and the agility to create after the catch. Will benefit from improved core strength to enhance durability and gain experience to improve technique. What we've essentially seen there when we say something like that is we see a player that's got an awful lot of skill that is rail thin. So when he measured in with us initially, and that would have been in 2021, he was rated 6 foot. He was barely 170 pounds. So he's a guy that needs to grow, get bigger, get stronger, really good with the ball in his hands. And so, again, that's a report from 2021. He's in the 2024 class. And to me, like, it's all developmental, right? It's
Sure.
Get them in the weight room, start to feed them, see how they grow, see how much bigger and stronger they get because the skill's there. But and to be honest with you, we've talked about this countless times. I mean, guys like this are what have developed a program like Mississippi State, right? I mean, that's you bring them in, you bring them along. If you're lucky, you can redshirt them. It's getting more and more difficult to do that now.
It is.
Transfer portal and guys want to play, right away. And you got to have guys that understand the process. And not everybody does, but some guys do.
Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. And, Tom, I know we did this 6 months ago, but Cam Franklin, defensive lineman, is Ole Miss's highest rated recruit. Give us the eval, and maybe if you can, if you've got one top of mind, a comp for Cam Franklin, who's committed to Ole Miss.
So we have him at almost 6'5", 261. We wrote an eval on him in 2021 and 2022. We gave him in our initial grading process what we call an EP5. That's an elite Power 5 grade. That's our highest grade that we would give a prospect, meaning that we think that the vast majority, if not all, of the recruiting attention that this kid would get would be coming from elite level Power 5 programs, right? The Ohio States, the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Michigans. And so for this to be in the mix for Ole Miss, I think is a really big deal, because I think it demonstrates how far you're coming. It demonstrates your worth in the state. Because we hear people talk about all the time, you got to keep your best players at home. But not only do you have to do that, you've also got to keep them away from your competitors too in state.
Sure.
Not always easy to do. So they've got a head start right now at Mississippi State. It's something that they can use to their advantage. But really, really talented guy. I think he is – I don't know if he's overly flexible in terms of bend. He's a little bit more linear in his movements. I'd like to see more, I would say, enhanced flexibility when it comes to the ability to bend and get skinny as a pass rusher, but extremely talented, great size. And a really good get-off. Has heavy hands. Uses his hands really good at the point of attack.
All right, so that's the eval for Cam Franklin for Ole Miss. We're visiting with Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN. He joins us on the Out of Bounds Show. I'm going to throw one more at you that I didn't put in the text. and you can pass, and we can move on to Levy. I got a couple of questions there.
Okay.
Wide receiver out of Alabama, Mario Craver.
Mario Craver, 2024 guy out of Clay Chalkville High School. Right?
Yes.
That's our guy. All right. What do we have on this young man here? Wrote him up in December of 2022, so just a little over a year ago. This is one of those guys that is undersized but compensates with speed and quickness. Here's my just brief report. Undersized, quick and fast, excellent change of direction and ability to make people miss, gets to top speed rapidly, good hands, has return upside, ideal slot utility guy. We have him, let's see right here. He ran a 22 flat 200 meter, which is looking pretty good. He ran 10.74 in terms of the 100 meter in 2022's track season. And then we have him on film. We have an algorithm where we can actually tape miles per hour. Ran 20.7 miles per hour. So this kid's moving. He's not very big, but return type guy, type of player that can go once he gets the ball in his hands and space.
Nice. All right. Luginbill always comes through. All right, Lugs. Let's switch gears. Levy has put together the staff, everybody, but I think one assistant coach. And do you know this guy's made several stops in the SEC, but I don't know if you've come across him or not. He hired as a DC. Now, this guy's considered a hell of a special teams coordinator, and he's been with Saban at Bama and Kiffin at Ole Miss and Florida and South Carolina. His name is Coleman Hutzler.
Mm-hmm.
He is Levy's new DC, but he's been special teams and linebackers coach for 4 different programs, plus in the SEC, plus Texas, Tom Herman for a year. Do you know anything about Coleman Hutzler?
Yeah, I've actually known him for quite a while because when he used to work for Will Muschamp in South Carolina, and when my son was coming up as a younger long snapper, he was the special teams coordinator there. Went to camp a couple of times straight down the road. So I actually got to know him there before he actually moved on to Alabama. But he's got a very vast and diverse background, not only in the kicking game, but certainly on defense as well. And so he's had a lot of success at a lot of places, man. And he's worked. He worked for everywhere from the Group of Five at New Mexico to non-scholarship FCS at the University of San Diego. He was at Stanford as a recruiting assistant, so he's been around the block. But I like this hire. I think this is, and I think the one thing that Jeff Levy will do is he will hire grinders in recruiting because he knows that's the only way to catch up.
Well, people really like him as a coach. I think there was a little bit of a surprise there on the DC front, although he's got a ton of experience as linebackers coach, but he's a proven top 10% special teams coach. So at least you know he can run a unit and also be efficient and effective. I think that is a positive out of the hire, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, when he spent time sharing some coordinator duties at Texas, I want to say 2020, maybe 2020. They were a top 10 team, like on many defensive categories. They played well in certain categories in that year, and then they were really disruptive in terms of tackles for loss, things of that nature. So there is a background there.
Okay. I want to switch gears with you one more time. You were traveling and you were doing a show, so I don't even know if you had an opportunity to see it yesterday. But Kadarius Toney lined up offsides for the Chiefs. They made a big play. Kelsey catches the ball, throws it back to Toney. He scores. Mahomes goes nuts in the game. He was offsides. Did you get to see any of this yesterday, Luke?
I didn't. I've only seen like the aftermath and the commentary about it, especially as it relates to Patrick Mahomes just blowing his stack on social media. I was My wake up call was 3:30 this morning, so I was on a 5. You texted me yesterday. We still got to go at 10:30 Eastern time, and I had to check and make sure. I had to figure out when I was getting in, and so I'm sitting there in the airport this morning, and I'm just kind of paying attention to him coming unglued about it. So fill me in a little bit.
Okay, well, Mahomes went nuts after the call. And I think his stance was that Tony pointed over to the official and maybe got the nod. But it was obvious as the announcers were calling the game and everybody could see that he lined up offsides. My comment was, hey, this isn't junior high football. I mean, the NFL, you've been there. I mean, the NFL, you got to know your stuff. Not even college. You can't you can't do it.
Well,
and so
the thing that's weird too, if you ever watched an NFL game versus a college game on TV and looked at the formation, say nobody's on the line of scrimmage, and they never call it.
Right.
In college, there needs to be a definitive difference. Your outside guy's either on or off. Your slot's either on or off, and you can't be covering each other up and being close. But in the NFL, they allow it all the time. Now, I didn't see the play. I just know that for years and years and years, I've always looked at that and been, why did they never call legal formation in the NFL? Because they rarely do.
Right. I guess you could argue they're lackadaisical they let it go, but they darn sure didn't with the Bills and the Chiefs. All right, man. That was great recruiting hit on the guys that Ole Miss and Mississippi State have either landed. I guess nothing's official till the end, or targeted. And we enjoyed it. I know you had a big weekend. Get some rest, and we'll talk soon, okay?
All right, man. Thanks. Appreciate it. See ya.
Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN. He joined us on the Out of Bounds show. So he talked about Juice Wells heading to Ole Miss. Chris Paul Jr. headed to Ole Miss. Cam Franklin. Well, I'm sorry. Let me walk that back. Juice Wells is not official. People feel really good about it after this weekend. I'll catch hell if I say it like that. Chris Paul Jr. is official. Cam Franklin's been committed. He'll be official next week if they hang in there. These are all who knows, okay? But you feel good about some of these guys.
Right.
And Juice didn't get to play really at all this year, but was very productive prior to being injured this year. And then we talked about Blake Shapen, again, who, when healthy, is a very productive quarterback. And Luginbill likes him a lot, but he's got to stay healthy, which Levy's crossing his fingers. If this is the only dude they're going to get, then QB1 has playing time, Power 5 at Baylor, very productive. Can't beat that. So we had 3 interviews today on recruiting. If you missed any of them, they'll be on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Apple Podcast or Spotify. Search Out of Bounds with Bo Bounds. We appreciate you going to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and searching Out of Bounds with Bo Bounds. Hope you have a great Monday. A little chilly out there. We'll continue on this week. We'll be live from Kincaid's Fine Clothing store tomorrow. Live from Kincaid's in Ridgeland. And they've got the Gentile, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State gear.